Today I will talk about tables of contents. So we will insert a table of contents into a document. But to do that, I will need to make some changes to the document. So I will cover a few things that we have done already. So that will be an opportunity to review certain things. And also we'll see how to structure the document in order to be able to use tables of contents and indexes. So the first thing we'll do is insert another document into this document. So I've got the booklet here, the practical grammar booklet, which I'm going to improve a little bit because at the moment it has no styles. So everything is manually formatted. So that's bad. So I'm going to insert the other document so that we have some more content to work with. And you will also see how to insert another file into the file you're working with, which is a simple process. So we need to go to the place where we want to insert that file. So I'm going to insert the file before the irregular verbs section because the second part of the booklet is about passive voice. So of course irregular verbs are also relevant for passive voice. So they should ideally be at the end of the booklet as a reference for both tenses and passive voice. So I'm going to insert a new page here. So of course the easiest way to do it, or the fastest way to do it, if you just want to use the same page style, is to press Ctrl Enter. And then you've got a new page. So then, of course, we're going to insert something. So we go to the Insert menu. And we're going to select Text from File. So we're not actually inserting a file, we're just inserting the text, which is similar to copying, but it's more direct because we don't have to open the other file. Okay, and I'm going to look for the file. So that's Year 1 Booklet 2 Passive. And it's inserted. As simple as that. So it's been inserted here. You can see that we've got the title. And then we've got the content of the file. And then we have irregular verbs. So the next step is to insert the title page. So we want to have a title page for the whole document. So at the moment we have two pages which start each part, right? So we have this part, the second part, and we have the first part at the beginning of the document. So I'm going to remove this because this will be part 2 of the same booklet. And then I'll go to the first page and I can keep this, but I'm going to insert the title page or the first page because there is a style for the first page of the document. So for example, the page numbering will not start with that page. The page numbering will start with the next page. So again, I'm going to go to Insert. And if you remember, if you wanted to insert a different style or a page with a different style, then we need to go to More Breaks, Manual Break, Page Break, and then we select First Page in this case. And we click OK. Right, so this is the first page. And if we go to Page Styles here on the right, so not paragraph styles, but page styles, we can see that we've got, yes, so this is the first page. For some reason we've got this extra page here, which has the right page style. So I don't know how that happened, but I'm just going to delete or maybe we should use backspace so that we actually have this first page style. Okay, so probably I'll just double click here, and this has applied the style, and the next page has the default style. Okay, so we had this right page style for some reason, but I just applied the first page style to this page because we've got the page break here, so this will only be applied to this first page. So now we will need to make some changes to the styles. So we will actually need to apply some styles to this document, because a table of contents or an index works on the basis of styles, especially the headings. So it looks for the different headings and the different levels of headings to organize the content and to create the index or the table of contents. So we'll see how that works. So we need some headings in our document. So I'll switch to paragraph styles. And as you can see, everything here is in the default style. So all the formatting is unfortunately manual. So we're going to make some changes here. So we're going to have a style for the title of the document, and then we'll have the heading styles for the individual parts. So we have two parts here, one about the tenses and the other one is about passive voice. And then we will have another level of heading for the individual tenses or forms. And we'll probably have another level for those forms and uses. Although we don't necessarily need that in a table of contents. But we'll probably apply them anyway. And we'll see how that works. So we will apply these styles to the individual headings. And we will use some search and replace techniques to quickly find the relevant headings and sections. So first I will change the style of the title here. And this should be the first page, the title page. So I'm going to separate this part 1, the title of part 1. So I'll just press Control Enter to start a new page. Okay. You can also see that there are all those empty lines, which of course we don't want. We want to define that in styles. Okay, so this is the first style, or the top style, so to speak. So I'm going to apply the heading style to it. Okay, and actually I should select both lines. Okay, so now I'm going to modify it, and I'll go to alignment. I'm going to center it, and perhaps we'll also select a much larger font, because this is the title of the document. So we want something big, such as 40 perhaps. I will apply to have a preview here, and this looks okay. I could also make it bold. And of course I could change the font, but I will worry about that later. So we are not going to focus too much on fonts and on design, because we want to work with tables of contents. Okay, so this is applied. I also need to introduce some more spacing above the paragraph. So I don't need any spacing below, but above I probably need something like 5 or even 6 centimeters. Okay, so it should be almost in the middle of the page. Of course, you can see that because this is a new line and effectively a new paragraph, this spacing is also applied here, and obviously we don't want that. So the way to deal with this kind of problem is to use backspace and then just insert a new line without starting a new paragraph. And the shortcut for that is Shift Enter. And you can see that we do have a new line, and the spacing is controlled by line spacing, also defined in the style, so you can also change it. But the paragraph spacing is not applied. So we have this title here, and if we go down, for these parts we will use heading 1. And all these headings depend on heading. So they inherit properties from the heading, unless you specify those properties individually. So let's apply this heading 1, and you can see that it's huge because it's already inherited some properties like size from heading. So again, we have to change it individually. So we can leave the spacing, but of course we need a much smaller font. And you can see that here the size is shown in percentages. So that's the percentage of heading. So this font is actually larger, even larger than the heading. So we can make it smaller. We can make it, for example, let's say 80%. Okay, and we'll do the same that we did with the title. So I've pressed delete and Shift Enter. Okay, so now the font is a little smaller. Perhaps we could make it a little smaller still. Maybe 70%. Okay, and we need to do the same for the second part. Heading 1. And we can see that it's moved to the next page because we've got all these extra lines. So let's just remove them. using delete. Okay, I've gone too far. Right, so there are no new lines here. This is the first line on the page. This gap is just the spacing defined by the style. And again, we remove this paragraph break. So Shift Enter, and we have these two together. Okay, so now we have all these individual sections or individual tenses. I'm going to remove this name, and there is an extra page here which we also need to get rid of. Okay, so I'm going back to the beginning. Okay, and we have these individual tenses, individual forms. So we want them to have the heading 2 style. But if we wanted to do that manually, just page by page, that would take some time. So we're going to try and find all those tense names, those sections, by using the search function with the formatting option. So that's what we did in our previous classes. So if we look at this, of course this is manual formatting, because if I select it and press Ctrl M, you can see that this formatting is removed. Okay, so we need this manual formatting to see the properties. So we can see that it's got 14, the size is 14, the font is Ubuntu, and it's also bold and italic. So that's something that we can work with, because probably no other text in the document has exactly these properties. So I'm going to press Ctrl H, and I'm not typing in any text because the text will differ. But of course I'm going to click Format, and here the size is 14, it's bold and italic, and we can also select the font, because I think it's the same font for each of these sections, although actually this particular font is probably applied to the whole document, but it won't hurt. So we've got Ubuntu, bold italic 14, and we'll see how that works. Okay, so I'll click Find All, and you can see that this has been selected, and if I scroll down, all of these sections are selected and nothing else, which is what we want. Okay, so now we can easily apply the heading 2 style, and it's been applied, and you can see that it also inherited some features from the previous styles. For example, this spacing, which of course we don't need, and the alignment, the center alignment. So let's again modify this style, and we're also going to make the size a little smaller. So we probably keep the 14. Basically we'll preserve those features that the manual formatting had. So that was Ubuntu 14, bold. It looks pretty small here, but we'll see. Because 14 is relatively small for a heading. So that was bold italic, I think. And we'll also set the alignment to left, and we will remove that huge spacing and apply. And it looks okay, I think. So it's basically the same font, and we need to add some spacing below because we had some manual spacing there, and it looks better. Okay, so now we do have that style, right? So we have now more control. Right, so as a final step here, let's also apply the heading 3 style to these forms and uses. Okay, or perhaps we'll not do that, because that will make things a little more complicated. We don't really need these items in the table of contents as separate items, because that would look a little strange, perhaps. The only thing I'm going to change is because perhaps we do want to have a style for these sections for other reasons. So I'm going to try and find all of these and apply this heading 3 style anyway. So I'm going to look at the properties again. So we've got Ubuntu as well, 14, bold, but no italic. And hopefully these are the only sections that have these features. Okay, so let's do Control H again. First, I'm going to remove that formatting, that previous formatting. And I'm going to select bold 14. Let's try without font name, because as I said, the font is the manually applied font for the document is the same. So that won't help us. And I'm going to find all. And you can see that it's working. The problem is that it's also selected this heading here. And just this one, not the others. So it looks like there's manual formatting left here, because it shouldn't select text based on the style, the formatting defined in styles. Because of course all these headings for the individual tenses, they all have the same size. They're also bold, but they're also italic. We're not specifying that italics shouldn't be selected, but here this option including styles is not selected. If we selected this option and did find all, then of course these sections would also be selected, except this one. So it seems there's something weird going on. So let's just select this this text and Control M to remove any manual formatting that may have been left, perhaps. So I'm going to try again and untick including styles, try again. And now it seems to be working correctly for the whole document. We've got forms and uses. Okay, so now we can apply the heading 3 style. And we can see that, of course, it inherited some of the features of the parent styles. So let's make the font 13, just to make it a little bit smaller. And of course the alignment should be to the left, and there should be no spacing above, perhaps a little bit of spacing below. Let's see how that looks. And that should be fine. Okay, and since we're practicing the search functions, let's change all those use sections to uses. So instead of use, we'll have uses, because we have those individual uses. So perhaps it makes a little more sense to have uses. So how do we do that? Well, of course, we know that it's always going to be this word, right? But of course, here the size is 13. It's also bold. So let's try to search for use. I'm going to clear the formatting here, and I'll select size 13, bold, and OK. So because we have use typed here, so that should ensure that the form is not selected, right? And find all. And you can see that nothing is found. And the reason, of course, is the fact that we haven't ticked this option, because the size 13 and the other features of this style, they are all defined in the style. They are not defined manually at this point, because we've changed that. So I'm going to tick this option, select this option, and find all. And we have all these sections selected, or all these headings. And I'm going to replace that with uses. So we have uses everywhere instead of just use. Okay, so it's perhaps time to insert the table of contents at this point. So usually we have a table of contents at the beginning of the document. So we're going to insert it between the title page and the first part. And we have our page numbers, so they will be useful. Okay, so let's insert a new page here. Control Enter. And I'm going to apply the default paragraph formatting, or the default paragraph style here, so that we don't get any funny formatting. Okay, and of course, if you want to insert something, we go to the Insert menu. So we go to Insert, and then we've got Table of Contents and Index, and we select this last option, Table of Contents, Index, or Bibliography. And this is the dialog that we see. We can give this a name, so let's just leave it at default, at the default value. And you can see that you've got all these options, but we'll look at them later. So now let's just insert this default table of contents. Okay. You can see that this contents heading, which is the style of this title of the table of contents, again inherited those properties from the heading styles that we worked with. So let's remedy that. It's got this value of 6 centimeters. Okay, so you can see that it's working. Of course, because we applied this heading 3 style to those forms and uses, it also features those sections here, which is perhaps a bit odd, although, you might want to go directly to the uses of a given tense. So for example, if I want to see the uses of past continuous, I would click here, and I actually need to, as you can see, I need to control click, because the idea is that you can edit this, you can work with this, so you wouldn't want to accidentally click it and just be directed or taken to a given section. Of course, if you generated a document such as a PDF, then of course you would have those links which you could just click directly. You can change those settings obviously, but it's probably a good idea not to have this option to just use a link by clicking, because as I said, it can be problematic when editing a document. So if I click on or control click on the uses of the past continuous, I'm taken directly there. So of course it's arguable whether we need that, because it's all on one page. So do we really need to be taken to the uses, right? Because if we find this page, we can see the uses immediately. But since we defined that level 3 heading, it shows up here. However, we can also change that. So when we right click on this table of contents, you can see that we've got this option of edit index. You can see this option evaluate up to level. So then you can just have the 2 levels, and that's probably a better idea here. Okay, so we can move to the individual parts, obviously. Part 1 or part 2. Or we can move to the individual pages with the tenses. And of course, we also have the page numbers here, like in a regular book. So let's say now I add a section. So I'll go down to this part, and we've got these irregular verbs here, as you can see. And we forgot about them. So let's say that we also want to have irregular verbs there. So you can see that this is still the default style. This has not been changed. And the reason is that it's got size 15 here. So the manual formatting is size 15. That's why we didn't find it and it wasn't changed. Right? So of course, this is on the level of, if we look at the table of contents, it should probably be on the level of those parts, because obviously all these sections are subsections of these 2 parts. So irregular verbs are independent. They're a separate part, so to speak. We don't have to call them part 3, but we can have them on the same level as these parts. So they should be given heading 1, the heading 1 style. And of course, the problem is that the formatting is, again, not really appropriate here. So this is one of the rare occasions where manual formatting can be useful, because in this particular situation, we want this heading to be on this level. So we want it to be on the same level as those two parts. But the formatting should be different because this part is different. So in this case, we'll just do some manual formatting. And we will remove this spacing, maybe add some spacing below, and we will adjust or align the text to the left. And also we need to change the font, but that will be changed in the separate character dialog, because it works a little differently from working with styles. So we'll just change the font here. Maybe let's have 15, the size that we had before. And let's remove this extra line. Okay, so the style is applied, but we have some manual formatting to make it look the way we want it to look. And if we look at the table of contents, we still don't see it because we need to update it. So we need to right click and update index. And you can see irregular verbs appear here. And we're done. And finally, let's look at the settings of this index, because a table of contents is a type of index. So that's why we see these entries here: update index, edit index. So let's edit. Let's look at the settings basically. So of course we have the title, we've got these levels, so this is important. We have the entries, so this is basically how these entries are formatted. So if we have chapters in our document, then we would have the chapter indicated, and we can of course edit these items. We have a tab, we have the page number, right? So yeah, so this is something to experiment with. We can also apply character styles to these individual levels of the tables of content, so we can have different fonts for individual levels. Right, here you can apply paragraph styles to the different levels. So that's something you could experiment with. I've never really worked with this. You can also have this table of contents or index in multiple columns. And finally, you can apply a background color, or even an image, a bitmap. Okay, and there's one more thing. You can see this background, this grayish background. Of course, this will not show up in a printed document, or if you exported this to a PDF file, this would not be seen. And I talked about it previously when I talked about fields, because these are also fields. This is also a kind of field, because this is something that changes dynamically depending on what happens in the document. And we saw that when I added this irregular verbs heading, then it updated it. So it's something that is dynamically updated. So that's how fields work. And those fields are indicated in the document. They are marked in the document with this gray background to let you know, to let the person working with the document know that this is not regular text, that this is a field that you cannot edit in the normal way, but it's dynamically updated. Of course, you can switch this off in the settings as well, but often it's a good idea to have it on to be able to see what you're working with.